It's Monday and we all play Magic, so obviously the sky is falling. Let's talk about the newly announced Jumpstart Historic Horizons. Wizards of the Coast accidentally gave public access to a announcement post that's going up on the mothership today on the 26th of July. We're going to be getting a soon-to-be-released arena set called Jumpstart Historic Horizons. The full article, like I said, will be out today. If that product sounds like someone just picked 3 words that were tangentially attached to contemporary Magic from a hat and put them together to create a set name, well, you're not far wrong, right? But the names do mean something. Let me explain. It is going to arrive on the 12th of August on MTG Arena and bring cards from Modern Horizons 1 and 2, as well as 31 brand new cards that you'll only find in this digital release. So you mean like new exclusive cards, right? Like early access cards, right? You mean this stuff will come to paper later, right, Wizards? More on that in a moment. It will be similar to previous Jumpstart products in that each booster is randomly selected pre-made lists of cards that you get 2 of and you slam them together to make a deck and you battle it out in a game of limited, which sounds fun. They do mention that there are slots in each of the lists that have a 50% chance to be a different card or a 25% chance to be another card to add more variety to the lists. I think this is a good thing. It means that you don't know exactly what your opponent's playing from the first land that they play, because the art on the lands in the first Jumpstart was themed to each of the lists. So I think that adds another layer of variety that I think sounds fun. If the article still goes out today to announce it, as it was labelled as the 26th when it got leaked, it did announce that there will be previews, and there will be a link to an article on that showing who's getting those previews. I haven't got one of them for the next week or so. So these 31 cards and the different lists of them will all be previewed by content creators over the next week. I did joke quite a bit about will we really get a 2-month window with no releases from Wizards of the Coast to give us time to breathe. Although this isn't a paper release, it is funny. As a content creator, I don't really mind. I like talking about Magic and it's fun and it's part of the job and everything. But yeah, we were optimistic to think we'd get a 2-month window without releases and perpetual hype preview season. They showed off one pack and the percentage chances of some slots to become other cards and stuff, and essentially just a lot of fucking information to simply say it's Jumpstart, a wicked product which I enjoyed a lot before, is back and is injecting new cards into Historic. So far it sounds good, so what is the problem? Well, the problem is twofold, one very minor element and one that is much larger. The minor element is that Historic is a confusion collection of cards at the best of times that they keep just injecting cards into via things like Jumpstart 1, Jumpstart 2, or Jumpstart Historic and whatever. They've injected things via the Historic anthologies as well. So there's an argument that trying to pass what is actually legal in Historic is very, very hard, where most sets have a starting point from a certain set onwards, or in Modern's case, 8th edition onwards, plus both Horizon sets, because they were designed to add into it. There's an argument that I saw this a lot on Twitter when I asked people in a poll recently, would you like to play Historic in paper? People said not really, because they found it very difficult to figure out what the fuck was legal. Without an app or program like Arena helping you build your deck, which I guess you could use, without those filters, it's very hard to know what is and isn't, because it's such a weird eclectic mix. I think that eclectic mix is part of what makes Historic appealing to me. I think it feels very different to both Pioneer and Modern, and even Legacy to many extents as well. It's not like a Legacy light thing. So I think Historic is great. I quite like it, or I did up until Brainstorm. Time Warp, that's a whole different discussion piece. But it's interesting that this is another introduction of new cards that will make it more confusing for some people to get into Historic. So I understand that criticism. It doesn't bother me so much, but I get it. So it's going to make people less keen to get it into it in paper if it was to replace Pioneer, which I always thought it would. Pioneer I haven't been enthused about since Inverter. Historic has took my attention away from it. Never super keen on Pioneer. I thought Historic was going to take over from it, but for this reason and the one coming up, that's never going to be the case. The real reason that many people are upset was because we all recoiled at first at the addition of 31 exclusive to Arena Magic cards. I also did think, fuck this at first. I don't want to be old man shouting at clouds. Just hearing that sentence, I was like, fuck no, get me out. Now, these cards already exist. There are already some Arena exclusives, primarily Inspiring Commander, a 6-mana card draw engine in white that many people do want for Commander. I know I do. I know Saf and I've tweeted about it on several occasions. I'm sure someone at Wizards probably loses sleep at night over this card because it's a colour pie break. God give me strength. So this isn't a new thing, but it is fair to say it's unusual. We've had one lot of it before, and this is the first time since those cards introduced in the starter decks of Arena that we're going to have it happen again. I just want to come out and say, firstly, I really dislike the idea of having cards that exist on Arena that you can't get in paper. I think it makes Magic feel inconsistent and too separate, and I like the idea. I personally like the idea that physical paper and digital Magic are the same thing, so it feels cohesive and whole, and you can jump from one to the other, start on one, move to the other, and it all works together like an ecosystem. As Magic the Gathering continues to feel relatively neglected in terms of quality of life updates and fixing of bugs and pretty much everything else, Arena is becoming the premier client for Magic. So to see it move formats away from even being replicable in paper, that does... It invokes a small amount of fear for what that might mean for the future of Magic. Especially if we're talking about the competitive future of Magic. Because if Wizards do still dip their toe into competitive Magic, and again, that's all up in the air after the collapse of the MPL and the changes to prize structures recently, and just Wizards just fucking canning organised play. But if they come back, you would assume that they would start with Arena, and then one of the premier formats, you've got Standard of course, but is Historic. And that means that there will be a format that's not replicable on paper, which means competitive Magic, paper Magic, digital Magic, they all sort of diverge in different paths. Now, some of you might be saying this is not a problem because it's only a matter of time till we get these cards that are only on Arena, these 31 and the other ones too. I have been assuming up until this point that Inspiring Commander will make it into paper at some point. It's just been a while now. It's been, what, 2-3 years we haven't seen it, but I assume it's coming eventually. However, that's not the case because we're going full Hearthstone, baby. That's not a value judgment. I'll unpack that more in a moment, but let me show you the evidence and the stuff I'm talking about. A couple of days ago, because of the leak, Tumblr user Lord Jarrow asked Mark Rosewater on his Ask Him a Question blog thing called Blogatog. Mark Rosewater, being a big designer at Wizards, if you don't know, asked, why are you continuing to make digitally only cards? Does that not split the player base, the game, and create feel-bads even more? The answer was the digital-only cards only work on digital. They aren't cards we can make in paper. Magic is a game of many formats, and different formats use different cards. Reasonable response. Let's unpack it a little bit. I was hoping that the second sentence, they aren't cards we can make in paper, meant maybe reserve list stuff. Maybe Historic's going full Legacy or Vintage Light with power or duels being printed into it, because you can't make those in paper anymore. And we've seen this in Modo time and time again, that they can reprint them in a digital way, they just can't reprint them in paper for fear of breaking the reserve list, doing a lawsuit. If you want to know more about the reserve list, I'll put some links in the eye and down below to some stuff where I've talked about the reserve list in great detail. But the first sentence is the digital-only cards only work on digital. Add to this a blogger talk from about 2 years ago, 2019, where he was asked by Yorgi North, is an Arena exclusive set with cards that can't be done in paper possible? And Mark Rosewater said it is. And if they have the 2-year lead time that they still claim for every product, then this thing probably was on the drawing board, or at least in early development at that point in time. This sounds more like cards that just will not work in paper. These are cards that can never be printed in paper because logistically they just don't work. This means effects like we have in Hearthstone and all other digital card games where it randomly generates a creature from throughout Magic's history, for example, or shuffles a card into your opponent's library, stuff we've seen in unsets that just doesn't really work or isn't possible, is a fucking nightmare to resolve in paper Magic. Now again, my first reaction was fuck no, please don't, but I think I've come around to it a little bit. There's a caveat to that though, I'm not super keen. Magic taking some cues from games like Hearthstone or Legends of Runeterra is a provocative title for this video, but it isn't necessarily a value judgment like I said. That is to say, it isn't inherently a bad thing that they do this. It's good to learn from your contemporaries. Ironically, on the topic of Hearthstone and Blizzard, this is what is supposedly killing World of Warcraft right now, and Blizzard alongside it to a lesser extent, an attitude of being too big to fail and too big to innovate in spaces that your opponents or your what's the word I'm looking for there? It's not opponents. Your competitors, that's the one. Your competitors are doing. Also, there's the truly shitty, toxic work environment, but that's not this video. In many ways, I think it's great for Wizards of the Coast to explore these spaces. I think it's a good thing to have them try new things. I don't think a digital-only card should be completely off the table. Well, they haven't even, it's not like it's a new thing, they've done this before. I'm not talking just the Arena cards like Inspiring Commander. This is Fairy Dragon, one of the Astral cards as they're called. Cards exclusively designed for and playable in the Microprose PC game Chandelier, which is 20 plus years old at this point. Something I desperately need to do a playthrough on the channel of as well. It has just literally do a random effect. It's probably from a limited number of things, but it's way more than you could calculate in paper. This is Murgish Cemetery. Sorry, it's not in English because there wasn't an English version. It's a 6-mana enchantment that activates 4, discards a card, makes an XX zombie, where X is the number randomly chosen between 2 and 6. not including one there. That is one of the Japanese exclusive cards, the Japanese exclusive Dreamcast game, simply called Magic the Gathering. And both of these come from a whole collection, a whole plethora, like 10 plus on each side, of cards that were made that only work in digital for those video game versions of Magic the Gathering. But that's the thing, both of those were for video game versions of Magic the Gathering, not the Premier client serving to emulate actual Magic at the moment and have formats that people might want to play both in paper and online. With that in mind, and in the interest of being as fair and balanced as possible, there are other examples of this happening. We had the Momir Vig, or I say had, we still do, the Momir Vig variant of Magic on Magic the Gathering Online. This is a Vanguard avatar that is exclusive to Modo, where you discard a land, pay mana into it to randomly generate a creature from across Magic's history of the CMC of the mana you put into it, a thing that paper cannot replicate without the aid of a computer program. The format is very fun, super fun, but as Modo's player base shrinks over time, it's been harder to get games in. I've played it on stream before. I think I did one video on it before as well. It's great. I love that these things exist. And that's a little bit less obscure, if still quite niche. So these things have existed before, they haven't destroyed the game, and I like that they exist. In essence, it's a different format, it's a mini-game, it's self-contained. I think the mistake here is putting these kinds of things into Historic, so that Historic becomes a completely separate animal, a beast into itself that we cannot replicate in paper now. These 31 cards close that door. We had the hurdle before of legality being a confusing fucking mess for some people, but they're closing the door, where paper Historic will, or could exist in theory, but it would be different to the digital online one. Now this has happened a little bit in the past when some cards have not been printed onto MTGO for like a year, 2 years. I think there's still some cards missing from like Conspiracy 2 and shit that I played in Pauper, so the online metagame changes slightly. But what that means is these formats may never get adopted in a way that they could have done if the formats were the same, right? People don't want to play a tournament online and play a tournament in paper and have a completely different metagame because the fucking random RNG cards exist. Beyond that, I also don't think it strengthens your brand. It gives the game variety, and I think variety is very, very good for the game. It's one of the reasons that I love Magic so much, because you can play it in so many different ways. And I think that can still be done without putting these cards into Historic. Some of you might think I'm being far too critical or looking to be negative to drive video views, which I'm not. My first knee-jerk reaction was fuck this shit, but I wanted to wait a few days before really making a video on it so I could stew on it over the weekend and just consider all the options and think about it a bit more. I think what this really shows is an ethos change. Like, the philosophy towards Magic, Arena, paper, the integration is changing. I originally intended this week to do a video about how Magic is changing, the face of Magic, and how Magic is as a game and a product is changing. Paper is collectibles and multiplayer Commander. And digital may well be the future of competitive Magic because it's where Wizards can make the most money from, well, a predatory ecosystem that doesn't give money to the secondary market. That said, maybe I'm being optimistic and we'll never see competitive Magic from Wizards again, and we have to wait for third parties to do that. Flesh and Blood is starting to run physical events through Channel Fireball, one of my sponsors. Full transparency, I don't know any of the behind the scenes stuff. No one at CFB tells me tidbits about future events like this. So far, nothing about Magic. And that might be Wizards being more careful in this post-lockdown, still in a pandemic world, and I respect that. But the radio silence from them and the changes to competitive play recently doesn't instill me with a lot of hope that they really give a shit about continuing Magic in the physical space beyond Commander. If the future of any form of competitive Magic or tournaments is the occasional online arena event from Wizards, and that's a big if too, right? Making it be an Historic means it's a format that people can't even aspire to play in paper, which means a big divide between the two. It further illustrates a desire to separate the two, and I think that it isn't healthy or constructive towards the long-term viability of the game, but perhaps the growing prices of collectible staples that just won't ever see enough reprints will be the bedrock of physical paper Magic for now, whilst Arena shoots for the stars and becomes a wildly different beast as we get more and more digital-only RNG weird stuff that just can't be replicated in paper. Maybe in a year, 2 years, 3 years, Arena will look absolutely unrecognisable to the average paper Magic player. But that said, Magic's getting there already, right? If Arena's doing all RNG shit, and then paper Magic is primarily Commander, and next year we get Lord of the Rings and Warhammer, it's very, very clear that Magic is not how it looked 2 or 3 years ago, for better or for worse, regardless of your opinion on it. It's very, very clear that it's changing. I just don't know if it's for the better yet. So, to summarise my point and hand off to you to tell me in the comment section what you think, whether I'm being a twat or whether you think I'm actually on the money, I think that this space being explored is fucking wicked. I want to see this. A Jumpstart limited environment only on Arena with RNG cards? Sign me up. I just think putting them into Historic is a mistake, because Historic now becomes its own beast, completely detached from paper Magic. And maybe that's a bias from me. Maybe there are people watching this video who play Arena and you don't own a single physical card. Tell me in the comment section below. I want to know. Because I want Magic to survive, both digitally and paper. I love digital Magic. Modo was my escape to play Modern and Legacy when there weren't enough events near me in the olden days before the pandemic. Way before the pandemic. So maybe I'm biased because I want paper to survive beyond just Commander. I love Commander, but that can't be the only Magic I can play physically. I won't enjoy that. I think it's a mistake to separate them, but ultimately, time will tell. And maybe I'll just look like a negative Nelly in a couple of years when we're playing paper Modern tournaments again and such. I've been Vince, also known as PleasantKenobi on the internet. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. I really do want to hear what the community thinks of this. I'm trying to mediate people towards being less knee-jerk and less like fuck whatsy, because that is very boring and very old and not helpful towards an actual constructive conversation where we learn and grow, right? Anyway, let me know in the comment section below. I've been Vince, and I'll see you in the next one. Ta-ta for now.